I want to talk about the books that I read in September, and some of these books you're going to see me read in more elaborate detail at a separate time in another video, but I did want to create a video that kind of recapped my thoughts and feelings pertaining to all of the books that I read in September. And then at the end of this vlog, I'm going to put a list together of books that scare me. Happy spooky season. So this will be very exciting. I, as of right now, don't know what I'm about to choose for October, so we'll see. The first book that I read in the month of September was Final Girls by Riley Sager. It's quite appropriate for Halloween time. This was my first Riley Sager book ever, and that's funny to me because I see this author being talked about all the time on YouTube, on TikTok. I know he is quite popular in the mystery genre, mystery, thriller, horror genre. I would definitely recommend this to you if you like thriller books and you're in a slump, because I read this in one day, and I don't normally read books in one day. It is about a girl who has survived a mass murder. When she was growing up, she went to a house in the woods with her friends, and everyone ended up getting murdered, kind of coining her as a final girl. This book takes place jumping between the past and the present, and I think the reason why I was so attracted to this book and couldn't put it down is because you're constantly discovering more about what happened. She doesn't remember everything that happened in her past. She's blocked a lot of it out, but when you keep reading, you stay with her while she remembers more about what happened. In the present, she's dealing with this suspicious person who might be a friend, might not be a friend, and at the end of the book, everything kind of comes together in a way that I personally was not expecting. I'm usually pretty good at predicting twists before they happen and predicting the ends of books, but for this one in particular, I did not see anything coming. So that could potentially be exciting for you. Okay, I gave this 3 stars. The only reason that it's not higher is because I didn't necessarily feel like the twists at the end were earned, if that makes sense. I feel this way a lot with mysteries and thrillers. While I was shocked, I also wasn't sure if the author had that planned from the beginning. Does that make sense? Sometimes it felt like a twist happened just so a twist could happen instead of being informed by character development throughout the book or plot development throughout the book. That being said, I still want people to read it if they're in the slump because it was highly entertaining. Just be careful. Obviously, it has to do with some dark subjects. Please check the trigger warnings on this one. The next 3 books that are on my list, I read blind. I didn't know who the author was, what the name was, what the reviews were, what it was about. I didn't know anything prior to reading it. So I'm happy to say that these reviews are pretty unbiased. That was for a challenge that I have not shared yet, but am in the middle of editing. Stay tuned for that. That being said, this next book is called Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld. I really hope I pronounced that right. I have many thoughts. Many thoughts on this book. I think my favorite element of this book is the fact that it is about a woman in her 30s who then goes on to her 40s. I loved that. I felt like that was such a breath of fresh air, and if I do go on to a little bit of a rant right now, recently a lot of the books that I've been reading have been romanticises with female protagonists who are in their young 20s or late teens, and there is nothing wrong with that. A lot of the demographic who reads those books is in that age range, so I don't want to knock that at all. However, I am not in my early 20s or my late teens, and sometimes I have this internal dialogue that I will like almost lose, like I will be less interesting as I age. And I don't believe that about other people, but I think that there's this subliminal messaging that comes from reading a lot of stories about people who are younger than me. It's interesting that the most empowering, mature, emotionally intelligent female protagonists that I've read about have been 19. That just does something a little strange and concerning to my brain. Like, maybe I just haven't read books that would help me with this, but I want to read about a strong female protagonist who's inspiring and fun and exciting, who is not that young. This subject actually kind of reminds me of The Substance, which is a movie that I just watched, and it's kind of about how women feel like they're going to become more invisible or lose their value as they age. And again, it's like, as much as I see others and don't feel that way about them, I have this fear and like internal dialogue that is so present. That being said, I just love that she was in her 30s and went on to her 40s. It was nice. Romantic comedy is about a woman in her 30s who works at an SNL adjacent company. She's writing around the clock, has a really fun life and career. And at this company, she meets a songwriter, and there's a little bit of chemistry between the two of them before they part ways. You get to know more about Sally and her own insecurities through this beautiful relationship that takes place throughout the rest of the book. I thought it was fun to read about someone who worked in the entertainment industry because I'm familiar with the entertainment industry. There were some things that I didn't really like. I found the main character kind of annoying, kind of selfish. She sold herself as a feminist, but I actually thought she had a lot of hatred towards women. I do think that Curtis Sittenfeld was aware of this because it was acknowledged at the end. So for that reason, I think that she's a very talented author. I also wanted to, but couldn't quite believe the romance between the two main characters. There were certainly moments. I mean, the middle was one of my favorite parts of the entire book. I thought that we got a lot of witty moments, and wit is usually the thing for me that sells me on chemistry between characters. But yeah, something fell flat for me. I'm going to rate this book a 3-star. And it's not because I think it's a bad book. It's because personally, I, as a reader, have a hard time reading from the perspective of a character whose self-loathing and unwillingness to introspect leads to repetitive, selfish behavior. Certain elements I loved, certain elements I didn't love so much. The third book that I read this month, Scythe. I rated this a 4-star. I'll probably think about this book for a long time to come. Scythe takes place in a society where they have eliminated every natural source of death. There are no diseases. They have come up with a way for humans to heal themselves incredibly fast. Transportation is the safest that it's ever been. That being said, eliminating the natural cause of death means that the population growth gets out of hand. So they as a society have to figure out a way to balance the population again. That takes the form of something called the Scythedom. The Scythedom is a selection of human beings who choose who lives and who dies, and who are personally responsible for killing those people. I had to stop reading this book a couple times because it made me feel existential in a way that felt uncomfortable. I think it's a really important book. I think that it made me think about death in a way that I hadn't before. The only reason why this is not a 5-star is because I didn't necessarily feel like I connected to the main characters. And also, I didn't love the end. I thought it was maybe a little predictable and kind of cop-out, but it's still going to get a 4-star from me because this premise is so different and thought-provoking and important. Okay, and then the last book that I read in September, and I have to say my favorite book that I read in September, was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Weir? I actually don't know. I don't know if it's Weir or Weir, but he also wrote The Martian. I will not be disrespectful. Let's see. Weir.
Andy Weir.
Andy Weir. Brilliant. This was brilliant. This book is simply a 5-star because I have never had so much fun reading about science. I don't read sci-fi as well, and this book convinced me that I might love sci-fi. The science felt digestible, it felt fun and unpredictable, and really added to the believability of the whole story. I thought it touched on certain aspects of humankind without shoving it in your face, just enough to make you think. It was also funny. Project Hail Mary is quite literally about the world ending. There's this new life form that has taken over space, and I'm not talking about little green dudes with antennas. I'm talking about cells, amoebas. They eat the sun, and because of that, the sun is losing its energy, which has massive, massive repercussions for Earth. It's going to mess with the entire food chain, and people are going to starve, and human life will not be able to make it if someone doesn't do something. There's this woman who takes charge, breaks so many laws, but gets people to come together and figure out how to save Earth. The main character gets wrapped up in this not only because he's human, but because he's a science teacher, and at one point in time he wrote a piece of scientific literature that caught the eye of the person bringing everyone together. So now he's involved, and he ends up on the ship. He goes on a mission to save Earth. I think similar to Final Girls, the reason why I was so invested in this is because the main character doesn't remember the past. At first, he wakes up from a coma and doesn't quite know who he is or why he's in space. So we learn about his past at the same time that he remembers it, and that's so important to the story. I didn't expect this to be as wholesome as it was. So wholesome! Like, I was beaming. I was laughing. I was so invested in this one particular relationship that takes place, and what a heartwarming book. I'm so happily surprised that I loved a book that was science fiction, and I think this was just such a memorable and enjoyable introduction to the genre, and it will probably stick with me for a really long time. Okay, now I'm going to write down a list of books that scare me for the month of October. Oh, whoa. I'm going to write down a list of 10 books, and I'm going to let a computer decide which ones I read. Let me just pull up a list of classics, as one does. Alright, the lighting is different because the sun went down. That's how much time I was taking when I was writing these. I've written down not 10, but 12 books that intimidate me. And if you saw this list, you would probably laugh because the variety is extreme. I'm afraid of some of these for certain reasons and other books for other reasons. This is it. Oh, you can't read it? Great. 1. A Secret History. 2. Game of Thrones. 3. Lord of the Rings. 4. Lord of the Flies. 5. Pride and Prejudice. 6. A Little Life. 7. War and Peace. 8. 1984. 9. The Bell Jar. 10. Crying in H Mart. 11. Babel. And 12. 48 Laws of Power. Very, very different books, but intimidating to me in their own way. We're going to let a random generator now decide which of these books I'm going to read for spooky season. I'm picking 3. Alrighty, the first number will be 12. 48 laws of power. Okay, 9, and then 5. So that's the bell jar. Okay. And Pride and Prejudice. What a selection. Happy October, happy reading. Thank you for watching this video. I enjoyed talking about my September reads, and hopefully you stick with me to read some of the books that I'm intimidated by in the month of October. And maybe you'll feel inspired to read something that intimidates you. We can do this together. I will see you next week.